Let's tackle the sleeve. So when you trace the sleeve, you need to fold it in half to find the center line. The underarm seams are symmetrical 99.9% of the time. So flatten the sleeve around the seam so the seam is on the edge and pin it in place. Then smooth the sleeve so it lays flat and pin it in place. You need to be careful of the sleeve head here. The underarm seam has stopped, so you don't really have a guide for the center line. So see how I'm smoothing up from the top of the underarm seam to find the center line? Now you've got the center line. Don't worry if the center line doesn't match the shoulder seam, it doesn't have to. Then I've cut a piece of pattern paper big enough for both sides and drawn a line down the center. This will be the center line and the grain line of my sleeve. Then place the center line of the sleeve next to the grain line center line on your paper and pin it in place. Start with the lower half of the sleeve. Now this is really important. Don't force the top of your sleeve head onto the center line. Especially if your sleeve is fitted, it should be pulling away from the center line. Why? Ease. So if your sleeve is sitting away from the center line at the top here, it just means it has ease, which is actually great. You want your sleeve to be sort of sculpting around the top of the shoulder here. You actually need it, especially if your design is fitted. So leave the top as it is. Now you can trace around the seams. Drawing the underarm seam and hem is easy. I simply draw around the edge of the pencil, making sure I double check the corners are correct. To do the head, I'm just going to place my finger near the seam and peel up the fabric to reveal the seam underneath and trace along it, taking it very slowly so my line is really accurate. Make sure you draw a notch at the shoulder seam too. Now I've almost done this side, but I've got a gap here. I'm just going to draw around it for now. Then I'll remove the sleeve and pin it to the other side of the sleeve cap. Front and back sleeve heads are different. Well, they should be anyway. Unless your clothing is really oversized, like a really oversized t-shirt or sweatshirt, then they can be similar-ish. I personally think they should always be different. And I've done a really detailed sleeve drafting video. If you're interested in pattern making or making your own sleeves, you should definitely check it out. And also if your clothing, you like the fit but the sleeve's still a bit off, maybe there are some drag lines or it's feeling tight, this video also has really great fitting tips to help you perfect your sleeve head. Some people trace both the front and back sleeve head at the same time. I find it more accurate to do them separately, but it's up to you. It's a bit fiddly to reposition the sleeve, however I do have some tricks. Before I do the other side, I draw a perpendicular line across the pattern at the underarm point. This will help me reposition my sleeve. Now I'll flip the sleeve and reposition it so the underarm and the hem line up with the underarm line and the hem line, and then I'll pin it in place. Then just lift up the fabric and trace the other sleeve head. I'm not going to bother doing the underarm seam and hem on this side because the underarm seam and hem should be symmetrical. And once I draw the underarm seam and hem and finalize their shape on the first side, I'll just fold the paper and trace over the lines to copy it to the other side. Now for the sleeve head, I'm just going to draw over my lines and make them look a bit nicer by smoothing out any bumps. Then I'll draw the underarm seam, just smoothing out any bumpy lines. I know the hem should be straight because it was a large hem, so I'll just find the average and draw a straight line across the bottom. Then I'll put a notch along the underarm seam, about halfway, so it's where the elbow would be. Then I'll fold the pattern in half and copy the underarm seam to the other side. And I'm going to mark the front with an F and the back with a B, so don't forget. So back to the sleeve head, I need to work out this ease situation at the top here. And to do that, I need to work out how much ease I have first. This is also a good way to check the sleeve. So I'll grab my front and back pattern pieces. I didn't copy these. This dress is 12 my one dart fitted dress block, so I already have the patterns. Then I'll measure all the notches on my armhole and mark the same distance on my sleeve pattern. And I'll do that for the front and the back. So these notches are where the front and back armholes are finishing, and the gap is how much ease I have. And I have 1.5 centimeters of ease. I thought I might have more, so let's do a little test to see how accurate my tracing was. I have the original pattern I used to create my toile here, and I'll just lay it underneath, so you can see the difference. Okay, so my sleeve shape is looking okay, but it should be a bit wider. See how the underarm seams aren't in the same location? Actually, it's probably a bit hard to see on camera, so maybe I'll pin it together and hold it up. Actually, I'll just sketch where the line should be. If I move the underarm seam lines out and increase the width, I'll get the extra ease I'm after too, so that's why I don't have as much ease as I expected, but it's not a disaster. The lower half of the back sleeve head needs to come out a bit too, but the top is okay, and the front is looking pretty good. And if I look at the underarm seam, the elbow width is perfect, but the hem is actually a bit bigger than the original pattern. It's not looking too bad really, so let's keep going. Next step is to draw in the rest of the sleeve over the gap here by blending the lines to create a nice shape. And I need to move the shoulder notch, which was marked as being over here. Ease is gradually eased into the top third of your armhole. So now I need to move the shoulder notch, so it's pretty much in the center of the ease. As a guide, I'd say the amount of ease in the front and back sleeve should be about the same, but I'd often do a couple more millimeters on the front, but it's about half. So I'll divide my ease in half, and then just put the shoulder notch in the middle, and my sleeve outline is done. All I need to do now is add the seam allowances. So if you're a bit worried about tracing sleeves, I know sleeves can be a bit scary in general, just remember that you can always fit your pattern when you sew the toile, and even your final sample, you can still add some on from the sleeve seams or take some off. There are opportunities to fit and adjust your sleeve, and as I said, I've done a video very detailed on how to draft and fit sleeves, so check that out. For more pattern making tips, head to my website, clickedpatternkits.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. Then you'll receive a welcome email with the 10-step pattern checklist I use before sending my patterns to production. And you'll get 10% off your first Clicked pattern kit order, which means you can get the PDF version of this one dart fitted dress block, which I used in the video, for less than $29 Australian. This block is skin tight and keeps darts to a minimum, so it's the perfect base for creating fitted dresses and drape designs. I've got lots more pattern cutting videos coming up, so subscribe to my channel to stay in touch.